Good morning and welcome to the Trinity Forum. My name is BJ Owens. I'm the Dean of Trinity Cathedral and I'm joined by Lique Gates, and we're so glad to have you. Lique is the senior strategist of Cleveland Votes, and I should just start off by saying we are how many days away from an important election?
8.
8 days away. Is there such a thing as an unimportant election? I don't think there is, but this one is just about as important as any of them. And so with just a few days away from our election, we wanted to chat with Cleveland Votes and to welcome them to the cathedral as we talk about not only their mission, but about democracy in America and in Northeast Ohio, which we think is certainly essential to our lives of faith as well, but also as being citizens. Cleveland Votes is a nonpartisan democracy-building movement that works to reconstruct and strengthen power through active participation of collective partners. Guided by a system of networks, they promote informed, action-oriented mobilization that shifts power toward equitable civic engagement and infrastructure. And as the senior strategist, Lique Gates has primarily focused on the finalization of their 2022 to 2026 strategic plan, which amplifies the vision of Cleveland Votes by analyzing the organizational landscape and solidifying ways to expand their footprint in Cleveland's ecosystem. The goal is to uplift current and future partnerships with various community organizations and grow their reach into the community. So, Lique Gates, we're so glad we can have you. And of course, we're joined not only by folks here in the cathedral as well, but we also welcome those of you who are joining us online as well. So that's Cleveland Votes in a big picture, but what is your reality right now, 8 days before an election?
Well, we are very, very busy. We just finished a series of civic holidays. So we had Vote Early Day, which was Friday. Yesterday we had a big event I was telling Reverend about, where we encourage people to come and vote early. A lot of times people tend to not want to vote because of the crowds, especially if they live in smaller suburbs, things of that nature, or they share a common polling place. And so we do like to encourage people to go to the Board of Elections. It's also a really great time to meet some of the candidates. They're often outside campaigning. You can meet their families and just kind of hear a little bit more about the issues that they take a stance on. Mm-hmm. And so it's just really, really busy, but also just really lovely because we get to meet so many people.
Great. Is it a festive environment? Do people have fun when they come out to vote?
It's a mixed bag.
Okay.
Yesterday so I am very new with the organization. I started in April. So I'm very new to the world of civic engagement, but within my 6-month tenure, I've learned that politics is not as taboo as people often perceive it to be.
Really?
No, people actually do enjoy talking about politics. They just don't like to be judged. And
okay.
So I think that open mind, open heart is often the best way to engage in the conversation. And so for me yesterday, we thanked every single person for coming out to vote. No matter what their political stance was. Every single person that walked past our tables, we said thank you. Thank you for getting up on a Saturday and choosing to exercise your right. Mm-hmm. And I would say we got 85% smiles, 15% frowns.
85%. If I preach and that's my statistics, I'm very happy with that.
I actually was ecstatic.
Okay.
As a strategist, I love data, and I was like, statistically speaking, we got a lot more smiles than frowns, and so it was really nice. And a couple of the frowns did stop and still got snacks.
Okay, good. That's good. What advice would you have for really anybody in this question of, we're willing to talk about politics, we just don't want to be judged? How do we really enter those conversations, both so that we don't feel like we're being judged, but also so that we create openness with people who may see things very, very differently from us?
So I'm going to actually take it back to my roots. Prior to me joining Cleveland Votes, I worked as a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant.
Okay.
And so with my DEI consultant, I never walked into a space expecting to change anyone's mind. Never. Because that's not my job.
Right.
My job is just to offer informed information based off of things that I know. And so I keep a lot of my conversations fact-based.
Okay.
That's often a way to kind of move away from judgment. We're just talking about facts.
Right.
And when you're talking about facts, people tend to add their opinions to things, but just kind of reeling it back and say, hey, we really want to talk about the issues specifically, and not necessarily what you think about the issue, but what you know. And so having that kind of attitude definitely works. Also, not being afraid. The conversations are uncomfortable. Leaning into your discomfort is definitely my biggest form of advice. If you're uncomfortable talking about it, you should probably not be having a conversation in the first place. But if you're genuinely walking in with the mindset of, hey, I'm chatting with a friend, and me and my friend don't necessarily see eye to eye right now, but at the end of the day, the intention is both of us wanting to exercise our right, I think that's a really good approach as well.
That sense of comfort going into a conversation, do you think research is important? Do you think having a balanced approach, what allows someone to feel like they're confident enough going into that conversation?
The same confidence you carry when you go vote.
Okay.
Like you often, you don't go in blind. I mean,
Right.
I can't speak for everyone, but for me personally, I do.
Hopefully we don't go in blind, but right.
Please research your candidates, please.
Right.
And so if you already have a baseline knowledge, and I also don't do party-based conversations. So
Okay.
it's not necessarily if you're a Republican or Democrat. Again, it's fact-based.
Right.
And so a lot of issues are way more important. And when you think about the issues, you need to think about the candidates that are pushing for those issues. You need to think about the ones that are willing to implement change
Right.
around those issues. And it looks very different when you don't know. So again, yes, research.
Right.
But also not going in with a dissertation. Like you want people to be comfortable and feel like they're not ignorant to the point where they want to walk away from the conversation.
Right. Good. Do we need to do a microphone? We're going to do a microphone switch with you.
Yeah. Ooh, can't get off.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, now we're off to the races. So, Lique, tell us how Cleveland Votes began and how that work has changed over the last 5 years.
Yeah, so Cleveland Votes actually started in 2014. It was started by two amazing Black women. I love to call them the movers and shakers of Cleveland, huge pollinators. So Erica Anthony and Crystal Bryant, both were sort of tangentially doing reentry work. And they really wanted to inform folks reentering society that they still have rights. A lot of times people who are reentering society forget that they can do things like vote. And so they really wanted to encourage them to just exercise their power because they're often affected by the carceral system. And so that work has kind of shifted. We still definitely have our hand in reentry work.
Sorry. Sorry.
Okay, there you go. We definitely still have our hand in reentry work, but right now we're focusing on something bigger, which is reallocating and redistributing funds.
Right.
So we have something called the Equitable Civic Engagement Fund, and this year we were able to give away $150,000 to 23 local organizations to help build their capacity and to continue doing the work that we're doing. And so it's kind of changed from doing a lot of reentry work to just amplifying and uplifting local organizations. The work already exists. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're just trying to amplify the people that are already doing it and just let them know, like, hey, we really see you as partners and we have access to resources.
Right. Well, I realize much has moved on. It includes the reentry work, and there's so much more. But I wonder, for those of us who might be new to that topic, why is that reentry work so critical to the fabric of democracy? Not only to the people who are experiencing, return, but why should we all be concerned about access to vote for those who have been incarcerated?
Because when you think about the policies that are put in place, specifically because of systemic injustices, they are not only impacted, but their families as well. And so when we think about just socially from a fabric issue, we really want to make sure that we're not just thinking about the returning citizens, but we also want to think about their families and the things that they went through. And so the resources that we vote for, it often helps those families. People make choices. And again, we're a judgment-free zone. And so while those people make choices, their families don't deserve to suffer because of the choices that they make. And a lot of times there are a lack of resources around it. So when we think about policies and procedures, or more so policies, sorry. When we think about policies and ways that
procedures are important too. That's all right.
Sorry, consultant talk. When we think about the policies, we really want to think about activating those citizens so that they can activate their families as well. Because it really is a movement. A lot of times when people don't know their rights, they don't use them.
Right. So what is the most important, or what is the most urgent issue right now in the fight for democracy?
I can't choose one, but I'll choose
You
my
can
top
do as
three.
many as you want, but give us
top
maybe.
three. So we just launched an environmental justice cohort, and that is something that's very new to me. Yes, I try to be very socially conscious about the ways that I use resources, but we all can get better. And there are a lot of Black and brown-led organizations in Cleveland doing the work, and we didn't know. And so we were able to receive a grant. And the point of this justice cohort is to spread awareness about ways that we all can get more environmentally conscious, but also follow the lead of people already doing the work.
Right.
Second,
Can you share the name? You said there's a number of groups already doing that work. Environmental justice and climate creation care is really important to us at Trinity. Can you share with us some examples of folks who are doing that work?
So the Cleveland Tree Coalition. Cleveland used to be called the Tree City, and over the past 30 or so years, we have extremely lost a lot of trees.
Yeah.
And so the Cleveland Tree Coalition is dedicated to planting as many trees as possible to help with our air emissions, which I think is beautiful.
Okay,
Cleveland Tree Coalition.
Right.
CCOL, which is Cleveland Coalition, forget the O, against lead. And it is led by an amazing woman named Robin Brown.
Okay.
Her family was victims of lead poisoning years ago.
Right.
And she has spent so much of her time advocating and just passing things like making sure landlords actually paint over lead before they rent out the houses, and just advocating and making sure that people know that kids in Cleveland actually suffer from lead poisoning at a very high rate. And
isn't that amazing that people don't know that?
It's really sad.
Yeah.
It is. But also people don't think about lead poisoning really affects kids in so many ways. It makes them really lethargic, and so they're in school all day, and people assume that they're just tired, but their bodies are actively working against lead poisoning, and so they're extremely lethargic. They tend to not have an appetite, and they're less engaged, which during school age years, that's the most critical development phase. And so Robin does a lot of work around that. The Economic Youth Environmental Justice is EYEJ. They specialize in teaching youth, so high schoolers, early college years, getting them engaged in sustainable work, helping them find ways to be more active in the climate justice fight. So those are just three.
Okay.
Another issue.
Okay.
I sit on the board of Preterm Cleveland, the local abortion clinic, and so reproductive rights. Really reframing reproductive rights as a healthcare issue has been very mindful and helpful. Ohio has been an interesting state in regards to the reproductive rights fight, but luckily the injunction was actually blocked, and so people can't access abortions right now. Abortion is still legal in Ohio. I tell people that every single day because somebody you love may or may not have an abortion, and it's really important for us to think about it. Third, I would say, that's a good one. Let me think about it, because there's so many issues. I'm trying to think.
Well, what about, as I drove past into church this morning, there was a sign that said Cleveland will have a very high rate of voter turnout. And I think that's both aspirational and I think trying to encourage us take a different approach to saying the sky is falling, but rather let's go ahead and predict something really good that's going to happen. But having a high voter turnout really everywhere is pretty important. But why do we continue to see in places like Cleveland a lower turnout than we would want to see, especially coming from, you're, I would imagine, all about promoting voter turnout. Why in a place that I think needs as much civic power as possible do we continue to see consistently lower turnout?
That's a good question. We partner with many organizations, so Policy Matters Ohio is one, and the data often shows the list of things that I kind of brought up. So long lines.
Right.
A lot of polling locations did change when the redistricting happened.
Oh, did they really?
They did.
Okay.
And so people didn't have updated information, and there was just a loss of hope, a lot of hopelessness around our democracy, and that is real. I think that not acknowledging people feeling really sad and feeling distraught around the way that things are happening right now in the world.
Right.
I mean, the world is going through a lot of changes, and so yes, we want people to go out and vote, and I think that right now we're just more so promoting people to encourage their communities. And so we're like, phone a friend. That's been my biggest thing, is like, hey, have you told 3 friends to vote? And actually following up with them, not just saying go vote, but asking, did you vote? Not who did you vote for, but did you vote? And if they say no, asking why. and trying to figure out if you yourself can change that why into, you know what, maybe next time.
Right. Have you seen anything change from one election cycle to the next? Do you have a sense that people are still feeling hopeless? Do you have a sense that there's something shifting and there's a greater desire to vote? Or does the work continue to be really challenging in terms of helping to overcome that burden of hopelessness?
That's a good question. I think just, again, I joined the org in April. And so when I saw the numbers from last year, you know, me and my ED had we had like a nice fireside chat about it. And one of the things she said is that focusing on voter turnout is great, but more so focusing on voter engagement. A lot of times people, they're not just numbers. People are people, they're humans, and we're not engaging with them enough. Right. Again, it goes back to having those conversations about politics. It's always been that taboo subject that people don't want to talk about.
Right.
And we need to remove that back. We need to get more comfortable having a conversation. We need to engage. Mm-hmm. Once we engage, they'll come.
Mm-hmm. So what does engagement mean?
Education.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely education, prioritizing education and knowledge. And also just sharing a spirit and understanding it really is a right that not many people have for a long time. And so taking that back is a good way to engage.
Mm-hmm. Well, spending some time with your strategic plan, which is wonderful, and I'm so excited for you all. And it sounds like you had a lot to do with bringing that to fruition. One thing there's a couple of things that really jumped out at me that I want to talk about. And one is joy. You talk about joy, which wouldn't be the first thing I thought of when I looked at, when thinking about democracy building or, electoral engagement. So tell me why that's important to you all and how you think that joy, why that's essential to building our democracy.
Well, hashtag joy in democracy. I have to put that out.
Hashtag joy in democracy. We'll do that on the...
That's exactly it. Our democracy, you should find joy in everything that you do. And yes, sometimes our issues don't win. Sometimes our issues shift and waver in ways that we don't desire. But at the end of the day, the work that we're doing it because we want to build for a better democracy. It's not just about me. It's not just about you. It's about so many other people that we never even touched.
Yes.
And for me, I try to find joy every single day in educating and uplifting people, even on the hard days.
Right.
Even when I get... or if I see something, because I read way too much news, I definitely consume way too much news, and that's okay. I'm acknowledging it.
Given what you do, I'm not sure you can consume too much news.
I consume a lot of media, and I don't take enough breaks, which my friends tell me often, but I love reading. And even when I read something that's not the most beautiful, I try to think of a way strategically that I can shift it and how I can implement changes in my personal work to make a difference. And that to me is joy.
Yeah. But I think we can get lost in, I think the importance of joy in what you're describing is when we're consuming news in whatever way we do that now, we can be overwhelmed, we can feel despair, we can feel hopeless, which I sometimes feel might be of design. In the church, we talk about powers and principalities that the less hopeful we feel, the less empowered we are, and the less likely we are to do things like vote, the less like we are to engage with our neighbors, the less like we are to believe that power can indeed shift, and then we don't, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think I hear you saying that joy is kind of an antidote to that.
It is, but it's also being mindful. Mindfulness is a part of joy and protecting your peace. And so, yes, hopelessness is real. I mean, if you are constantly inundated, first of all, we live in Ohio. There's a lot of choices that Ohio politicians make that are interesting. And
right. What's the phrase? That's a choice. That's a choice.
And we are affected by them.
Right.
And so, the lack of joy around watching people that you put hope in and you put faith in fail you is hard and it's difficult. And it takes us back to leaning into the discomfort. It doesn't feel good. Right. But what also doesn't feel good is doing nothing for me. Yeah. And so for me, I find power in something. Mm-hmm. I find power in knowing that my work, no matter what I do when I get up and have a conversation with someone, like I was at a party last night and we were in the back talking about the ballot, I feel good.
Good.
I feel good. I feel like, you know what? I might not have made the biggest change, but I made a change. And at the end of the day, that's what joy is to me, is knowing that you're doing something. Even if it's not the biggest thing in the world, it is, because you're leading to something bigger.
That's right. That's right. This is a quote from the strategic plan. Black, Indigenous, persons of color, LGBTQ+, persons with disabilities, and women have taken the brunt of the systemic failures that disregard and disrespect our sense of belonging. We continue to be othered by every system. That was really profound and really struck me as I read it. How does our current system, and system is a big word, and there's many systems, but they're all kind of the same system ultimately in this sense, but electoral, you name it, how do these systems continue to other, using that word other as a verb, other all those who have already experienced the pain of these systemic failures?
I love that quote. That was actually from the letter that our executive director penned to the city.
Okay.
And I would say, as a Black queer identifying femme, I definitely suffer a lot of injustices daily. The system isn't designed to benefit or uplift me. However, that goes back to that joy in democracy, is how do you find joy living? How do you find joy navigating a system that is not necessarily designed for you to function? Even when we talk about reproductive rights, I often try to remove myself, even though I am somebody directly affected by it. I try to remove myself from the conversation. And so when we think about how the system is still attacking folks that the system wasn't designed for, it often goes back to people who will not shift the power. And so that's one of the pillars of our strategic plan, is shifting power. And so the people that are in power are not willing to give it up. And because they're not willing to give it up, there are people that are affected by that because they have to have power over something. Right.
And how do we communicate to those who hold that power, perhaps not mindfully, not aware that there are systemic ways that power accrues to them, without being mindful of those who are really being shut out of that? How do we change the conversation?
I've had this conversation with a few people, and one of the big ones is, when you vote, who do you vote for? And so more often than not, the response to that is, I vote for myself. I vote for my family. I vote for my kids. I vote for my mom. And so I often challenge people and say, do you vote for the communities that you don't see? Do you vote for the communities that you have never visited? Do you vote for that small town that's 2 towns over that doesn't have access to the same resources that you have? But with the trickle-down effect, if you vote for the right policy, they can get resources. So asking who people vote for is a really good way to intro that conversation. It's also a non-judgmental way, because the world is bigger than just you and I. And so are you exploring the world in a way that you're actively changing and growing?
Now, this may be outside the bounds of what Cleveland Votes does, and so we can just let this question fall by the wayside. You don't advocate for particular parties or candidates, but in the conversation, so you just talked about, rather than voting for people, voting for issues. Is there a place in the conversation for raising up leaders who are just good at this? I mean, competent at not just saying the right things about a given issue, but are actually competent at navigating, the legislative process, the politics of actually moving us to a place of greater thriving.
Yeah, so we're nonpartisan, but we do work with organizations that have a C4 leg, which they tend to have advocates that do directly issue-based work. They also advocate for specific candidates that promote those issues. The answer is yes. I mean, it's a system, and the system has worked for a while, and it functions. And so, yes, there are definitely channels appropriately that you can go through, and also people, specifically advocates, that you can seek to ask for guidance and language around more partisan specific things.
Okay, great. All right, so this question, actually, once again, I'm stealing language completely from the strategic plan, but it's a great idea. What is the difference between performative activism and action that leads to true change? So your words, but really, really good ones.
That's actually something I literally put in there.
Oh, did you really? Nicely done. I saw that, I'm like, I wish I wrote that question, because that's so good.
Performative, okay, again, it goes back to who. I'm very big on self-introspection, if you guys have not picked up on that. Okay. But who do you do the work for? Who? It goes back to the who. Are you thinking about more than just yourself? I'm not saying be 100% selfless, because nobody is. We're human and we're American. But
We're human.
yeah, we are. We're human, but
human.
we're also American. We do that.
We're American humans.
So thinking about it from performative is, are you actively thinking about the communities that you seek to change? And with that being said, how much of their voice is being implemented in that work? Often people go into communities thinking that they have all the ideas, they have all the answers, because they have the money. The money's great. People need the money. But people also need to be guided on how to use that money to benefit exactly who they're looking to benefit. And so a lot of our work is listening to the people already doing it. We work with a lot of partners who are smaller donor organizations, so they don't have large operating budgets, but their work is so big, it's so impactful, specifically in those regions that they are. I'm thinking of Young Latino Network, which specifically does a lot of work in Ward 14, which is the largest Spanish-speaking ward in Cleveland. We don't speak Spanish, so why would we take away from people doing that work when we can actively grant them money and help them build the capacity to do the work that they're already doing? And so when we were thinking about that, that was my idea, is really building longstanding partnerships with people already doing the work, because I really don't like doing double work. I don't.
Right, that's right. Something that's been threading through this conversation, and whether overtly or under the surface, is so much in the work you all do, which is questions of power. I think it's helpful to raise this question. What is power? And why? What does it have to do with the building of democracy? So
we have a very unique role in the community. We have a duality in funding. So a lot of our work is rooted in philanthropy, and our Shifting Power pillar was really thinking about that philanthropic lens that we have. And so we receive funding. We receive funding from some of the largest institutions in Cleveland, and we redistribute that funding. And so we use this example. We have something called a community of practice, where we let all of our grantees meet each other and just chat, and we watch them resource share and just build community. And one of our grantees, we was like, hey, can you guys send us an interim report? We just want to see how it's going. And they were like, oh yeah. And we're like, no, we actually just want to see how y'all are doing. There's no strings attached to it. And so that's the power, is there are often strings that are attached, specifically in the world of philanthropy. And we really want to change that. We really want to give people resources to be able to grow and to do what they need to do without feeling like there's this microscope, or without feeling like they have to do a dance for us. That's not the intention, and that's how we want to shift it.
Okay. Can you say more about shifting power? Is it just in the philanthropic world, or is there a broader question of shifting power within the community? How does your work help that to happen?
So yes, both and. We are a 5-person team, and so while we want to save the world, we can't. But one of the things that we're doing specifically moving into 2023 is shifting power and grant making. So grant making is also one of our pillars. Big on accountability. We're like, hey, we get dollars, we give out dollars, but we're not just giving out dollars, we're giving out encouragement, we're giving out resources. We are trying to really be that bridge to show hey, philanthropic institutions can give money, but also literally be more involved. And I think historically they have shied away from it, mainly because of the way capitalism works. And so when we really start to look at the way that we shift power within capitalism, we're reimagining what it looks like.
Yeah, and I've seen this both, certainly in this conversation, but in others, that in a community like Cleveland, where there is a strong philanthropic community, there's a lot of desire to do the right thing, sometimes in a performative way, that there's kind of deep beneath the surface, there's still a lot of deep work to be done. Maybe you see it from your DEI lens as well. But then when we get into the question of shifting power, it seems like it's not just among the challenge, I gather, is not just, certainly not partisan, and that's not what we're getting into, but even among those of us who want to do the right thing, even of us who have the right language for it, we still struggle with true equity. We still struggle with systems, talking about philanthropy and grant making, that are not as balanced as folks think. And is that much of what you see?
It is.
Shifting?
It is, but that goes back. So when we talk about equity, think about unity. If we want to create a more equitable society, we need to be more united in the way that we present as a front. we're all trying to combat a system, some of us, in a way that isn't beneficial because you have 15 people fighting the same fight separately. And so you have 15 different forms of attack
Right.
for one big thing versus one attack with 15 different units.
Yeah.
And so for me, community building is key. That is something that I've always done in my personal work, and it's shifted into my professional life. I am really big about building community, about building and fostering sustainable relationships, and that is something that I've watched my boss do. I watch Erica do it all the time, and because of that, that's the vision that I see the organization going. And people really do love partnering with us because they see that we're all trying to fight the same fight. And so that's my advice. If you really want to shift power, figure out who else is trying to shift it with you and do it together. Don't do it against, do it together.
So let's talk about the direction that you're heading in. I asked the question earlier, when we chatted earlier, if you could work yourself out of a job, what would Cleveland look like? But you all kind of already addressed that a little bit in your strategic planning, which is we want a more liberated future. So, which is a wonderful phrase. What does that mean? What does a more liberated future for Cleveland, for Northeast Ohio, for America look like?
It's marginalized people who suffer every single day at the hands of white supremacy being able to rest peacefully. And the work will not be done until that happens. And so there is so much work, but it's okay because liberation is possible. Liberation is possible. It's possible for people to be free from the shackles of white supremacy. But that power has to be shifted. It has to be shifted. And until that power shifts, the liberation isn't there. But like I said, we're working towards it.
Good. So when you look at a congregation like Trinity, some of us here, some of us watching online, some of whom live within Cleveland, I think probably most of us live in the suburbs. How can we both be supportive? Whether we're talking about the city of Cleveland, whether we're talking about our local communities, how can we be involved in this shifting of power that you're talking about?
Being active within your own communities. That's a good start. And so seeing who lives in your communities, having the conversations with those who live in the communities, because once you start to vote for your community to improve, it's a trickle effect.
Right.
And it's really easy to branch out when you see other people doing it. But it does often take one person to start.
Yeah, good. Well, I wonder if we have questions for Lique this morning. And I may have to or Scott may need to walk the microphone to people.
Okay.
We had to pass you our
Community mic.
our Q&A mic. We're a surprisingly quiet crowd this morning. Has everybody made a plan to vote? Who has voted? I've voted.
Yeah.
All right, good. Is everybody else have a plan? We do have a question out there. Good.
So one year we were kind of volunteering to drive people because sometimes it's an issue just to get to the polls. So I'm wondering what's one number I can call or who can I contact because I'd be willing to drive people to vote. So.
Okay. No, because otherwise people online won't hear you.
So 411-VOTE is a number that is awesome, 411-VOTE. And it's a voter information line that's local, and it has all the information that you potentially need. But if you are looking to actually drive people in the polls, specifically if you live in a suburban area, the closest polling place to you often has like a rideshare program or rideshare options. Also, national companies like Lyft, they offer discount codes, and they've offered them for COVID because sometimes people are a little afraid to go out because of COVID and things like that.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries.
All right. Well, thank you all. And it was a pleasure to have you join us. Lique Gates is the senior strategist for Cleveland Votes. In a really important moment, we make sure you make a plan. Please go vote. And we thank you for your time. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And please enjoy. There you go. And we'd like you to have the mug.